joined now, 20 past 8 the time, by Wilson Chowdhry, who is from Chigwell and the chair of the UK RAAC campaign group. Wilson, thanks for coming on. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Morning. So I understand you've had a bit of involvement in this particular situation in Basildon.
Yeah, so we put the protest together because of there's been a certain amount of stonewalling from Basildon Borough Council, and we simply wanted answers. So, we have tried to address this through public representation at council meetings. We're literally being fobbed off time after time. Every time we were applying for it, the council secretly were then contacting residents, trying to give them some information, vague information that was often changed later. But the avenue of speaking at a council meeting was always literally removed, the rug from beneath our feet every time.
So quite a lot of uncertainty and still a lot of answers needed. We heard a bit of that from Tegan. Has this been used in properties elsewhere in the country? Are you aware of this happening elsewhere, Wilson?
Yeah, so my daughter is affected by RAAC. She bought a home in Aberdeen City Council, and in Aberdeen, sorry. But she bought the house at the age of 19. 4 months later, she was informed that there was RAAC in her ceiling, and that the roof potentially could collapse on her. We have struggled to try and get responses for them, and the Scottish Government is just as vague and limited with communication as Scottish councils as is Basildon. But the situation in Scotland is way worse. I mean, you've got 1,996 homes, whereas I believe in the UK, in England, we're talking about just the 18 on this night's estate. In Wales is 44 in a place called Huron. It is terrible. I think one of the things that Tegan perhaps didn't explain is the grant that was offered for 8,000 compensates them for these homes that they have actually invested into. So these people will have put, most council tenants will have been paying for new kitchens, they'll be paying for new carpets, they'll be painting their walls, they'll be making regular repairs to the properties. That's what they're being compensated for. But it sounds that the figure itself doesn't compensate them for the loss of identity, of being ripped away from their communities, their friends, their families, schools, etc. So, yeah, it's a very difficult situation. I hope people really understand how difficult it is for those who are now being forced to evacuate.
Yeah, and I mean, as Tegan mentioned, she doesn't want to live somewhere that's potentially unsafe, but what a lot of worry in the interim, and worry about money and how all of this is going to be paid for. What do you think needs to happen then, in terms of not just here in Essex but other parts of the country as well that have been affected?
It's very difficult. So, I mean, if we take the situation in Scotland, the Scottish Government seems to be blaming the UK Government. May say there wasn't a Scottish Government at the time that these properties were built, which is correct. However, the Scottish Government have devolved responsibility for housing since the formation in 1990. In the 1990s. The concern for me, really, with this whole issue is that whereas Basildon Council does seem to have fronted up some of the costs for homeowners, a £60,000 deficit on valuations is quite immense. And let me explain that to you. The lady who spoke in that interview actually undertook 3 professional valuations before the valuation that came across as a voluntary purchase from Basildon Borough Council. She paid for one of those. Each one of those is given a figure £60,000 plus from the offer given to her. Now, the economy has changed massively. I mean, trying to get yourself on the property ladder is going to be difficult. And in particular for people who bought these houses in Knights Estate, because the value of these houses, of course, is a lot less expensive than other areas. And that goes the same for people who are moving as council tenants. Whatever rents they're paying at Knights Estate is going to be increased wherever they move to. So these people will be under a significant financial burden once this move occurs. And these are other factors that I think haven't been looked into. Should the council be offering them a discounted rent for a period of time until they can adjust? For homeowners, there's options of a home for a home. They already have plans to rebuild the estate. Well, why not give them temporary accommodation and allow them to move back, of those who own properties, into newly built flats in the same vicinity, so these people aren't ripped out of their communities for too long. where many of them, having lived for some of them decades, don't then have to re-establish their lives elsewhere and can again get back to the communities that they love.
Which makes perfect sense, doesn't it? But I guess, do they have the temporary housing stock or the facilities and the accommodation to put people in that short-term period while it's, or maybe slightly longer-term period while everything's rebuilt?
This is always the issue. So the housing crisis across the whole of the UK is significant. I mean, there have been 7 councils in Scotland that have already declared a housing emergency. Irrespective of this, solutions do have to be found for these residents. So there does need to be a reprioritisation of budgets wherever they are. Personally, I think unless the UK government intervenes for the Scottish government and offers some sort of assistance, especially considering the right to buy mechanism under which these properties were sold was a UK government designed policy that was never really accepted by Scottish governments. Unless they intervene and take some of that responsibility, there will be a crisis in Scotland. And we're talking, as I said, 1,996 homes in the whole of Scotland. Those are figures by the Scottish Housing Regulator.
Yeah.
And my point on this would be that the 2 governments cannot now continue this argument for much longer. Solutions have to be found. In Basildon's case, they already have a plan. They have a proposal. They're going to be building these flats. If they're managing to find spaces for the 16 council tenants, then I'm sure they're able to find spaces for the homeowners, perhaps with a little bit more finance for storage, a little bit more finance for the cost of rent until these new properties are built. It could work. I believe it's a solution that's workable, but that's something for them to decide and reprioritise.
Well, thank you very much for joining us and telling us a bit about your involvement in the situation and the campaign. That's Wilson Chowdhry. Wilson is from Chigwell, chair of the UK RAAC campaign group. And of course, we've spoken at length about RAAC and affecting public buildings like schools, for example. Essex being significantly affected by that in comparison with other parts of the country. One of the worst affected areas, in fact, of the country when it comes to RAAC in some of the school buildings, and lots of work to remedy that still underway. That's not going to be sorted out quickly, is it? But we've also been hearing a bit about what's going on at the Knights estate in Basildon. This is a Ciparex, which is a RAAC-like substance in those properties built in the 60s. People being affected by that and told to leave their properties, and a lot of uncertainty around that. So if you're in that part of Basildon, if you're affected by it as well, 0800 111 40 41. Be good to hear from you in terms of what you know and what you've been through and how you're feeling. You can drop me a message as well if you like. Just start those messages with the word Essex. 8:28 the time. Must do a birthday shout out.